Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and I give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So, stick around. So, last episode, if you remember, we read Alma chapter 21, which I actually really love, and I think it's kind of overlooked because it basically chronicles Aaron's failings as a missionary. Like, he beats his head against the wall trying to teach the Amulonites and the Amalekites, and since they're Nephite dissenters and they are a lot more hard-hearted than the Lamanites that Amnon was teaching, he fails. They just don't listen to him. He gets nowhere. And what I took from that chapter is just that it doesn't matter how productive your work is in the name of God. It just matters that you're doing it in the name of God. You're doing it for him. You're doing what he asked you to do. And that's all that matters. Aaron was just as blessed as Ammon, even though he failed. Or, I mean, you could say he failed. I don't think he failed, but, you know, that's what it looks like on the outside, right? So anyways, I love that chapter. Go back and listen to it if you haven't already. But yeah, I think without further ado, we read Alma chapter 22. Now, as Ammon was thus teaching the people of Lamoni continually, we will return to the account of Aaron and his brethren. For after he departed from the land of Middoni, he was led by the Spirit to the land of Nephi, even to the house of the king which was over all the land, save it were the land of Ishmael, and he was the father of Lamoni. And it came to pass that he went in unto him into the king's palace with his brethren, and bowed himself before the king, and said unto him, Behold, O king, we are the brethren of Ammon, whom thou hast delivered out of prison. And now, O king, if thou wilt spare our lives, we will be thy servants. And the king said unto them, Arise, for I will grant unto you your lives, and I will not suffer that ye shall be my servants, but I will insist that ye shall administer unto me, for I have been somewhat troubled in mind because of the generosity and the greatness of the words of thy brother Ammon, and I desire to know the cause why he is not come up out of Middoni with thee. This encounter with the High King is much different than the one that we had on the road with King Lamoni and Ammon. He seems to be a very different person. He seems to be a lot less vindictive against Ammon just because he's a Nephite. In fact, he's talking to Nephites right now, and he is, like, treating them cordially. He's like, no, you can't be my servants, even though you want to be, but I want you to tell me about this. Tell me about what Ammon was saying. Like, I'm curious. And he talked about the greatness of Ammon's words, even. And we didn't really get an impression of what he took from the experience before, but now we understand, like, that experience, that brief encounter that Ammon had with the High King really changed him and showed him something that he hadn't seen before. Someone who had a power that he didn't recognize, and he wanted to know where it came from. So again, Ammon is showing his skills at making people curious. Like mystifying people with his power. Where does it come from? How is he doing what he does? Why are his words so powerful? Because he brings the Spirit in such a unique way that he really, if you're going to use the parable of the sower terminology, he's like preparing the soil in the people's hearts that he's talking to before he even starts to plant the seed. And that's pretty cool. So the king is completely ready to hear the words of Aaron. And this is very exciting. I love this chapter. And Aaron said unto the king, Behold, the Spirit of the Lord has called him another way. He has gone to the land of Ishmael to teach the people of Lamoni. Now the king said unto them, What is this that ye have said concerning the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, this is the thing which doth trouble me. And also, what is this that Ammon said, If ye will repent, ye shall be saved, and if ye will not repent, ye shall be cast off at the last day? And Aaron answered him and said unto him, Believest thou that there is a God? And the king said, I know that the Amalekites say that there is a God, and I've granted unto them that they should build sanctuaries, that they may assemble themselves together to worship him. And if now thou sayest there is a God, behold, I will believe. And now when Aaron heard this, his heart began to rejoice, and he said, Behold, assuredly as thou livest, O king, there is a God. And the king said, Is God that great Spirit that brought our fathers out of the land of Jerusalem? And Aaron said unto him, Yea, he is that great Spirit, and he created all things both in heaven and in earth. Believest thou this? And he said, Yea, I believe that the great Spirit created all things, and I desire that you should tell me concerning all these things, and I will believe thy words. This forwardness by the king of just being so willing to trust and believe all of their words is astounding. He's just giving them a blank check, like, whatever you tell me, I will believe. Anything. You tell me it, I will think that it is true because you told me. And it's also fascinating that in verse 7, when Aaron's like, do you believe there is a God? He actually references the Amalekites. So if you remember in Alma 21, the Amalekites and the Ammonites, they're Nehors, you know? They're after the order of Nehor, and so they believe that there is a God, but they believe that that God acts very differently than our conception of God. They believe that God allows everyone to be saved, and so it doesn't really matter what you do in your life. And so they acknowledge that there's a God. And the king is talking about that that now. He's like, yeah, these people called the Amalekites, they say that there is a God, and I've let them, follow their beliefs, whatever. But if you tell me there's a God, then I will believe you. And so, I don't know, it's just kind of a cool callback to what we learned last chapter, but also, I love Aaron's response. Like in the next verse, it says that his heart began to rejoice, and he said, "Behold, assuredly as thou livest, O king, there is a God." He is not holding back. He was making a bold statement of fact, knowing that the king would believe him. Because Aaron planted such a seed of curiosity and interest in the king that, again, the king is basically giving them a blank check to tell him whatever they want. Which is crazy on the king's part. Like, hello? Who does that? Anyways, this is fascinating. We're seeing the king has a lot of faith, and he's just looking for a place to direct it at. He's like, I believe something. I don't know what it is, but I have a lot of conviction for something. I've just felt the Spirit. I've just felt like the vaguest feelings, and I don't know what it is. But I know that you know what it is. So tell me where I should direct this faith that I have in me. That's what I'm getting from this. And it's so cool. Because clearly he has a lot of faith. Clearly he's fully willing to believe because he's felt something that he never felt before when he talked to Ammon. Clearly there's something there that he hadn't seen before because of how much it changed him. He just wants something to believe in. And it came to pass that when Aaron saw that the king would believe his words, he began from the creation of Adam, reading the scriptures unto the king, how God created man after his own image, and that God gave him commandments, and that because of transgression man had fallen. And Aaron did expound unto him the scriptures from the creation of Adam, laying the fall of man before him, and their carnal state, and also the plan of redemption, which was prepared from the foundation of the world, through Christ, for all whosoever would believe on his name. And since man had fallen, he could not merit anything of himself, but the sufferings and death of Christ atone for their sins, through faith and repentance, and so forth. And that he breaketh the bands of death, that the grave shall have no victory, and that the sting of death should be swallowed up in the hopes of glory. And Aaron did expound all these things unto the king. And it came to pass that after Aaron had expounded these things unto him, the king said, What shall I do, that I may have this eternal life, of which thou hast spoken? Yea, what shall I do, that I may be born of God, having this wicked spirit rooted out of my breast, and receive his Spirit, that I may be filled with joy, that I may not be cast off at the last day? Behold, said he, I will give up all that I possess, yea, I will forsake my kingdom, that I may receive this great joy. So verse 15 is probably my favorite verse in the chapter. It's beautiful to me, because now that he's learning Jesus Christ and the atonement and the creation and the fall and the transgression, all this stuff, he's learning about where we stand in the eyes of God and our relationship with him and the fact that we can have a relationship with him. And he basically asks, what do I need to do? And his wording, it pierces my soul. The way he says, what shall I do that I may be born of God, having this wicked spirit rooted out of my breast? I talked earlier about using a little bit of parable of the sower terminology, talking about preparing the soil and planting a seed, but now the king is bringing it back. He's like, root this wicked spirit out of my chest. You know when you're picking weeds, and if you just cut off the leaves of the weeds so it looks like there's less weeds, the weeds grow back, because you didn't kill the root cause of it. We call it a root cause for this reason. The roots are still there, and the king wants all of it out. He doesn't want to superficially clip the leaves of the wicked spirit that is in him. He wants it gone. He wants to change his entire being to get the peace and the joy and the salvation that comes with an understanding and a relationship with God. And also, additionally, what I think is beautiful about this is he ends up, at the end of the verse, he says, I will give up all that I possess, yea, I will forsake my kingdom, that I may receive this great joy. In fact, in this verse, he talks about spirit and joy 2 or 3 times. And I do want to point out that in this verse, he's offering all that he possesses. He's offering his entire kingdom. But do you remember the first time that Ammon met the king on the road? When Ammon had him at sword point, and he knew that his life was on the line, he offered Ammon anything he wanted, up to half of his kingdom. He values getting his hands on this gospel more than he values his life. When he was at sword point, the most that he was willing to sacrifice was half of his kingdom. And now he's willing to give up the entire thing just to know God, because he's seen glimpses of the peace and the joy that comes from having the gospel, and he will do anything to get it. So, to sum up, the king not only wants to change his entire being, he wants his wicked spirit rooted out of his chest. He wants it completely gone. He doesn't even want to leave behind one little bit of who he used to be. He wants to be completely changed. He wants to be born again in God, as he said. And also he's willing to give up everything, his entire kingdom, more than he would sacrifice when he was at sword point. But Aaron said unto him, If thou desirest this thing, if thou wilt bow down before God, yea, if thou wilt repent of all thy sins, and wilt bow down before God, and call on his name in faith, believing that ye shall receive, then shalt thou receive the hope which thou desirest. And it came to pass that when Aaron had said these words, the king did bow down before the Lord upon his knees, yea, even he did prostrate himself upon the earth, and cried mightily, saying, O God, Aaron hath told me that there is a God, and if there is a God, and if thou art God, wilt thou make thyself known unto me, and I will give away all my sins to know thee, and that I may be raised from the dead, and be saved at the last day. And now when the king had said these words, he was struck as if he were dead. Verse 18, which is the king's prayer, is also one of my favorite verses in the entirety of the Book of Mormon. I have a long list of favorite verses, but this is near the top. It is beautiful. He's so humble. He bows before a God. No, he prostrates himself before a God that he's not even sure exists, but he's been told by Aaron that he exists. And he goes, If there is a God, and if thou art God, will you make thyself known unto me? He's reaching out to find God. And he even says, I will give away all my sins to know thee. The king is beyond inspiring. He is willing to give up not only his entire kingdom, but all of his sins. He wants the wicked spirit, as we know, rooted out of his breast. He wants that sinful part of him to be completely gone. And he is willing to do anything for it. Clearly, something that he encountered made him feel a way that he'd never felt before. He felt the Spirit, he felt the presence of God, whatever it was. It changed his life, it changed his outlook, it changed everything about his priorities. And now all he wants, more than anything in the world, more than power, more than land, more than anything, he wants to know God. That's it. He's doing all of this. He's willing to give everything away to know God. It's certainly something for us to strive for. I find that giving up everything for God is hard. There's no better way to put it. It's just difficult. Clearly, the High King has been touched in a way that not many of us are touched by the Spirit. It is so supremely powerful. It changed his entire life. And so it kind of trivializes the troubles that we have day to day. We forget to read the scriptures, we forget to pray. This king's conviction kind of trivializes that. You know, we're like, oh man, it's hard to remember to read the scriptures, it's hard to pray. But then you read this story and you're like, oh, no, I can pray. Like, I can do that. I can handle it. It really reframes everything and reminds you that God asks everything of us. And King Lamoni's father was willing to give it all. And it came to pass that his servants ran and told the queen all that had happened unto the king. And she came in unto the king, and when she saw him lay as if he were dead, and also Aaron and his brethren standing as though they had been the cause of his fall, she was angry with them, and commanded that her servants, or the servants of the king, should take them and slay them. Now the servants had seen the cause of the king's fall, therefore they durst not lay their hands on Aaron and his brethren. And they pled with the queen, saying, Why commandest thou that we should slay these men, when behold one of them is mightier than us all? Therefore we should fall before them. Now when the queen saw the fear of the servants, she also began to fear exceedingly, lest there should some evil come upon her. And she commanded her servants that they should go and call the people, that they might slay Aaron and his brethren. Now when Aaron saw the determination of the queen, he also, knowing the hardness of the hearts of the people, feared lest that a multitude should assemble themselves together, and there should be a great contention and a disturbance among them. Therefore he put forth his hand and raised the king from the earth, and said unto him, Stand. And he stood upon his feet, receiving his strength. So I like the parallels between this story and Ammon's story. I mean, clearly there are parallels. A Nephite missionary teaches to a king, and then after he learns the truth of it all, he passes out and faints, and then the queen finds him. But the difference is that the queen here assumed the worst of Aaron and his brethren. King Lamoni's wife, on the other hand, believed Ammon right away. In fact, she even said the famous phrase to Ammon, To me, he doth not stink. Because she believed that Ammon had something good. She trusted him because she had been told by other servants what he had done. And yet the queen here King Lamoni's father's wife, which is quite the sentence, doesn't believe. There's some disconnect. Maybe she hasn't heard of what they're capable of. Maybe the king hasn't told her anything. But either way, her first inkling is to have them killed. Which, to be fair, if you are a wife and you come into a room and your husband is dead on the floor, standing next to Nephites, who are like bad people in your mind, and you wouldn't suspect them of killing him, I understand where the queen's coming from, but she certainly doesn't have the faith that King Lamoni's wife had. That Ishmaelite queen had so much more faith, so much quicker than the queen here is having. And in fact, even when she's told of the power of Ammon and his brethren by the servants, instead of being inspired or in awe of their power, she becomes afraid and sends a message to the entirety of the people to come and assemble themselves together, and maybe that entire crowd can kill Aaron and his brethren. Instead of being in awe, she calls in backup. Clearly, she's missing something here, and she doesn't even know that she's missing anything because she didn't stop to ask any questions. She just saw something and made an assumption, and then went from there. Now this was done in the presence of the queen and many of the servants, and when they saw it, they greatly marveled, and began to fear. And the king stood forth and began to minister unto them, and he did minister unto them insomuch that his whole household were converted unto the Lord. Now there was a multitude gathered together because of the commandment of the queen, and there began to be great murmuring among them because of Aaron and his brethren. But the king stood forth among them, and administered unto them, and they were pacified towards Aaron and those who were with him. And it came to pass that when the king saw that the people were pacified, he caused that Aaron and his brethren should stand forth in the midst of the multitude, and that they should preach the word unto them. And it came to pass that the king sent a proclamation throughout all the land, amongst all his people who were in all his land, who were in all the regions round about, which was bordering even to the sea, on the east and on the west, and which was divided from the land of Zarahemla by a narrow strip of wilderness, which ran from the sea east even to the sea west, and round about on the borders of the seashore. And on the borders of the wilderness, which is on the north by the land of Zarahemla, through the borders of Manti, by the head of the river Sidon, running from the east towards the west, and thus were the Lamanites and the Nephites divided. Now the more idle part of the Lamanites lived in the wilderness, and dwelt in tents, and they were spread through the wilderness on the west, in the land of Nephi, yea, and also on the west by the land of Zarahemla, in the borders by the seashore, and on the west in the land of Nephi, in the place of their father's first inheritance, and thus bordering along by the seashore. And also there were many Lamanites on the east by the seashore, whither the Nephites had driven them, and thus the Nephites were nearly surrounded by the Lamanites. Nevertheless, the Nephites had taken possession of all the northern parts of the land bordering on the wilderness, at the head of the river Sidon, from the east to the west, round about on the wilderness side, on the north, even until they came to the land which they called Bountiful. And it bordered upon the land which they called Desolation, it being so far northward that it came into the land which had been peopled and had been destroyed, of whose bones we have spoken, which was discovered by the people of Zarahemla, it being the place of their first landing. And they came from there up into the south wilderness. Thus the land on the northward was called Desolation, and the land on the southward was called Bountiful, it being the wilderness which is filled with all manner of wild animals of every kind, a part of which had come from the land northward for food. And now it was only the distance of a day and a half's journey for a Nephite, on the line Bountiful and the land Desolation, from the east to the west sea, and thus the land of Nephi and the land of Zarahemla were nearly surrounded by water, there being a small neck of land between the land northward and the land southward. And it came to pass that the Nephites had inhabited the land Bountiful, even from the east unto the west sea, and thus the Nephites in their wisdom, with their guards and their armies, had hemmed in the Lamanites on the south, that thereby they should have no more possession on the north, that they might not overrun the land northward. Therefore the Lamanites could have no more possessions, only in the land of Nephi, and the wilderness round about. Now this was wisdom in the Nephites, as the Lamanites were an enemy to them. They would not suffer their afflictions on every hand, and also that they might have a country whither they might flee, according to their desires. And now I, after having said this, return again to the account of Ammon and Aaron, Omner and Himni, and their brethren. Gotta have a geography lesson after the coolest spiritual moment of all time. Hello? Thank you, Mormon, for that. Also, thank you for the Nephite monetary system. Now I understand both the geography and the monetary system of a culture with which I will never engage. Oh, man. And it's especially funny because in the last verse, verse 35, he's like, okay, I'm done now. He basically says, after having said this, I return again to the account of Ammon and Aaron. So he's like, okay, I just like interjected so that you knew that, and now I'm gonna leave again, so goodbye. Anyways, thank you for that insertion, Mormon. I super appreciate it. That was like 10 verses of just geography. Thanks. I love the oddity that is Mormon's decisions sometimes. All of the stories, all the narrative, obviously has a purpose of being in there, and they all teach an interesting lesson, and there's always principles that you can pull from them. But every once in a while, he's like, by the way, you want the entire monetary system? Hear me out. What if I told you about the entire geography of the lands of the Nephites and the Lamanites? Just for your own information. Like, thank you. I mean, Mormon was writing this to the Lamanites, and maybe he assumed that it would be found a lot sooner than it was. And so, I don't know, maybe he was like, by the way, this is how it used to be before the Lamanites took over everything. Because remember, in Mormon's lifetime, like, there are no more Nephites. There is only Lamanites. And so I guess this is like a time capsule. He's like, this is how it used to be before everything changed. So, I don't know, that is kind of cool if you think about it like that. Because again, Mormon is like far in the future from the narrative that we're currently in. So, anyways, oh man, I love this chapter. Obviously, I love the first half more than the second half because geography is geography. But wow, the High King, all that stuff, that was beautiful. The way that he words his conversion, the way that he just completely accepts anything that Aaron tells him, that tells me that the Spirit was working hard on him. When he first met Ammon, he was angry at him for existing. He was angry at his son for hanging out with a Nephite, the son of a liar, as he said. And by the time that Aaron gets to him, clearly he's thought over some things. Clearly he's reconsidered a lot of things. And he was ready. He was ready to hear. He was ready to believe. He was just looking for something to direct his passion and his zeal at. Because he didn't know anything yet. He just had a feeling in him. He didn't have a direction to point it in. The sacrifices that the king was willing to make just to know God. That's so inspiring. And again, it kind of reframes kind of our day-to-day experiences. Because a lot of our day-to-day is like, I'm kind of a little bit tired. I'll maybe read scriptures later. Or like, I'll pray later. Or I don't need to pray over this meal. It's fine. But the king is over here like, yeah, no, I'll give every single thing about my life up if I just know God. If I just have that joy, that hope, and that peace that comes from having the gospel in my life. That kind of makes everything that we struggle with daily seem trivial. Not that it is trivial, but just comparing it to the complete and utter zeal that this king has. Oh my goodness, it's huge. So the standout verse is going to be somewhat predictable. It's verse 18, which is the king's prayer to God, which, to remind you, it says, O God, Aaron hath told me that there is a God. And if there is a God, and if thou art God, wilt thou make thyself known unto me? And I will give away all my sins to know thee, and that I may be raised from the dead, and be saved at the last day. And now when the king had said these words, he was struck as if he were dead. That is such a short verse. It's not that long, but it's packed with just passion. The king does not need a long speech to get across how willing he is to part with everything that he's ever known to know God. He does not need that many words to explain that he is humbly approaching a God that he didn't know existed before today. It's beautiful. Like, I don't know what else to say. This verse is beautiful. And it really calls me out, because oftentimes I do struggle with the little things, and it's sometimes hard to, like, muster the motivation to do the small things, but it's a lot easier after reading that verse. And I hope it is for you too. I don't know, I think I'm going to print this verse out and put it on my wall to remind myself, like, actually, if a Lamanite king who didn't know that God existed the day before can do it, so can you. So, anyways, it's inspiring, and I think that it is beautiful, and I hope that you do too. So yeah, that is the episode today. I hope you enjoyed. Oh my goodness, this chapter is beautiful. And now I'm the world's premier expert on Nephite geography. Just kidding, that is literally not true. I comprehended probably like a third of the information that was in those verses. But anyways, that's not super important. But yeah, so there's just a few links down in the show notes that I want to mention. There's like just getting more and more as I do more stuff. Sorry. Anyways, there's a let me know and learn link, so if you want to shoot me a message, you can do that, or you can DM me on Instagram, either way. There's also some links down there to let you find your own digital copy of the Book of Mormon. So if you don't currently have a copy and you can't read along, yes you can. The links are right there. Go click them. Thirdly, there's a quick support the show link, so if you want to shoot me a few dollars and support what I do, then that would be greatly appreciated. You know, virtual high five for you, I guess. Also, we are on YouTube, so if you want to go and subscribe to that channel, you can find the podcast there in addition to various daily trivia polls, etc., etc. You can test your knowledge. The questions that I come up with vary from difficult to super difficult, in my opinion. So, good luck. And yeah, finally, we're on Instagram. So go follow me on Instagram if you want to catch up with episode announcements, with like little clips from the episode, or standout verses with a little bit more of an explanation of why I love that verse. And also stupid little Book of Mormon meme reels, which I'm having a blast making. So yeah, follow me for that. And yeah, that's all I got for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.